Hey guys, it's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? Hey guys, it's time for another YouTube live stream. You can tell I'm still have not quite adjusted to my changeovers. So it's great to see you guys here. Hey Lily, thank you. Lily's from Southern Mississippi. You're trying to document your parentage or someone born around 1795. Oh, great. Hold that question. I'm going to get right to that because today I want to answer readers' questions. So, hey, Melinda from Buffalo, New York. Great, wonderful. Guys, as you're coming in, I love it if you want to give me a hello. And I'm glad to see the comments already. It tells me that you guys can see and hear everything okay. I am Lisa. I am of Are You My Cousin, the blog, where I'm strive to take the overwhelm out of your genealogy research. And today, for today's time together, I really thought what I wanted to do was answer some questions. You guys are welcome to put some in the comments, and I'll answer them as we go. I do have some that I know common questions I've been seeing lately that have been coming through my email or on the Facebook group, on the website. So I wanted to kind of address some of them because I've seen some kind of unusual things that have happened to folks lately, and I just want to. I've seen some unusual things in my own research, so I wanted to share some ideas, just in tips to kind of help us work through some of these as we go. So, hey, Kayla from Tennessee. Yes, neighboring right over there in Tennessee. And Barb from Alberta, Canada. Welcome, welcome. So glad you are here. So as we start talking today, hey, Dave. Oh, from sunny Seattle. I didn't think Seattle got very sunny some days, but I'm glad that you're here. Yes, so let's dive right into questions. And again, guys, feel free to offer answers as we go. Feel free to ask your own questions, however you want to go. This is going to be a little bit, I don't have a real formal plan, other than I do have pulled the questions that are from some of the websites that I want to see if I can get answered. So Lily actually was ready to go. She said she is trying to document the parentage for someone born around 1795, and where would I suggest she try? It's a poor family with very few records. Well, this is obviously a very hard, this is where the genealogy research gets very hard, as Lily has found out. Quite frankly, I have found out the same way. When it is a poor family, and I'm going to, Lily, is it safe to assume these are Southern ancestors, given that you're in Mississippi? If that's incorrect, just let me know. So when you are up against that, it gets really hard. And I will tell you, sometimes it is very difficult to solve this particular problem, and not all are solvable, but that's okay. We're going to work through it a little bit. So when they were born around 1795, typically, I'm going to go for church records if possible, because even those who were poor went to church. I would also check things such as poor records, or depending on the area where you're at. Yes, Lily said yes, these are in the South. Look for potentially parish records, or this is kind of that time period where you're not going to find as many of those, particularly in the South, but look for who was taking care of the poor. Typically early on, it would have been within the churches, but after the Revolutionary War, we saw less of that, and it may have become more in toward the counties. So I would get into some of those records to see if you can find any records that are supporting the poor. The reason I say that is if for some reason they were requiring financial support of any type of institution, then that would have been documented somewhere, hopefully. I say that what I will tell you is that if this were a North Carolina family and it's a poor family, you're looking for those types of records, you're probably not going to find them, unfortunately. They didn't necessarily survive. Virginia survived better than North Carolina. So part of it's going to depend on where that is. Southern Alabama and Mississippi. Yeah. To be honest, I don't know what all survived down there as much. I haven't done quite as much down there, but see what survived. The other thing is, if they were poor, were they potentially working on a large landowner's land? If they were, then you might want to try and seek out perhaps the records for that. If that person was prominent in the community, if they were well off, and I would check special collections for records. So it could have been accounting, it could have been anything that might name your ancestors in there. at least that's going to place somebody where you need them to be. It may not help with the date, but at least it's going to start to put them somewhere there. Yeah, farmers and large family. It is really tough. And there will be times when you don't find those. If possible, make sure you have turned every possible stone to find a family Bible. I've talked a lot about that, maybe not so much here in this group, but I know I've talked about it in when I was at Roots Tech and a couple other places. Make sure that just because the family Bible, you don't have one, make sure it didn't come down a different side of the family. Because if this was a large family, that family Bible could have very well come down one of the siblings. They may have been poor, but if that was an important possession to them, it could have perhaps landed somewhere in an archives at that point for that type of thing. So that's pretty much what I would do. If it is a male, check for the tax records. See if they exist for that area and make sure you know what the rules are for that tax. In other words, sometimes with tax records, if you can follow people year by year as they pay tax. And in this case, it wouldn't have been a land tax. If they were poor, probably it would have been a poll tax. And see who was required to pay a tax. Because you can sometimes see when they appear and when they disappear can be an indication of age, because oftentimes age categories were used for paying those taxes. So make sure you understand what was being taxed and who was being taxed, and how old they were when they no longer needed to be, so that if they drop off, then you may be able to estimate a birth date that way. So you won't get the specific date, but it can help you estimate a year a little bit better to be a little more specific. That's all I got for that on that. If anybody has anything else, please feel free to drop that in there. Those are very, very difficult, and unfortunately not all of them are solvable, which is sad, but it is the case. So Melinda, I don't know if I said hello to you from New York, Cheryl from Silicon Valley, Tanya from Georgia. Yay, I know you were here last week. Alva from Texas. Hey, Karen from Illinois. Wow, we are all around, aren't we? Okay, so again, if you are just joining us, I am really just answering questions. Lily had a great question. I would love it if you guys could, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of work through some that have been very commonly asked on my website lately and through email. And actually, one of them came through just before I hopped onto this YouTube live. And okay, guys, I have to be honest, I was almost late to my own YouTube live today. I was just working away here on my laptop, and a Facebook alert came over that somebody had asked a question about the YouTube live, and I went, oh my gracious, I didn't realize what time it was. So I'm glad I made it. Anyway, so this was a question someone in the group was asking. They are just getting started on researching a new ethnic group, and they don't know how to get started. So in other words, they are, my understanding was they've had some research experience, but they don't know how to start that new ethnic group. And basically, the way you get started with that is you have to do your research on that particular group. Now, let me give you an example of that. So I was researching my husband's side of the family, which has a strong Jewish heritage with it. And to be honest, I do not understand. I did not grow up in the Jewish faith, so I'm not familiar with a lot of the customs. I'm not familiar with the naming customs. And I literally sat down before I ever started looking for people and researched to understand the Jewish faith, understand their life here in America, understand their life as an immigrant. They came from Eastern Europe. So or what is today Eastern Europe. I researched and read the history of this group of people to better understand what their motivations were and what types of records they might have created. So that is the very, very first step when it comes to researching in an ethnic group, because if you don't understand what influences and why they made the decisions they made, then you're going to struggle in your research. You're not going to either find the records you need, or if you find the records, you're not really going to understand your analysis of them. You're going to be missing things that could potentially lead you to other clues. So absolutely do some research up front on what's there and what's available before you jump off into that next looking for people. All right, let's see. Lily said, You have your third great grandfather was born in 1795, but cannot locate his parents. And Dave had a question about my masterclass. Okay, hang on one sec. So Lily said she can't locate the parents of her third great grandfather there. I would actually, if you think they're in the same area, Lily, I would probably try and go back to tax records once again to see where they might have been. If you're not sure if he was new into that area, if you think he was the one migrating into the area. Okay, so his birth was deducted from records, his census, military records. If you have a sense of where he was living and you think he may have migrated away from the area where he was born, in other words, his parents are still in one state and he's somewhere else, you might want to look at migration patterns and then also look at the area where he landed, to see if he migrated to an area with other people that say, the history of the area says, a large number of these folks came from Wake County, North Carolina. Well, then you could perhaps look back into North Carolina to see if you can start teasing that out. Again, I use a lot of tax records or anything that could be a voter's list or anything like that that might exist for that time period to see if I find other surnames there that I could research out. You may find yourself researching folks that turn out not to be part of your ancestry, but at least it gives you an idea of could they have been. You don't want to miss them that way. If you see him in the military records and you have kind of deduced that birth date there, then you might want to see if there are other people mentioned. Sometimes you might find siblings, you can find cousins. See if there are any people mentioned, if you've got a pension record and you're reading through that to see who's mentioned, because it can give you an idea of a location, and it can also give you an idea if there are other collateral families that might be mentioned, and see if they might have some clues. You might be able to pick up a trail going that way to the parents. Still a little difficult, but I would give that a shot and see what you can find. I have seen clues to parents in those Revolutionary War pension records. In fact, my own ancestor did that. Okay, so Dave said, would I be willing to talk my masterclass that I mentioned in that? Would I be willing to talk about it? Sure. Dave, I'm going to do that I'll go ahead and do that now. So Dave is mentioning a masterclass that I emailed folks today, if you're on my email list, about. It's really kind of an idea I had while I was out running. Many of my readers have trouble finding female ancestors. I did for a very long time, and I still have a couple I'm still struggling with. And so I came up with an idea to do kind of a 6-month, what I call masterclass, or 6-month kind of short-term membership site. So it's not an ongoing thing. That would be monthly, that I would have, it would include one, masterclass or one lecture for the month, 2 live Q&As, an opportunity to apply for a monthly hot seat to look at your research, so that we would kind of be researching along, helping people, making sure that we're focusing on setting up good plans, and also teaching strategies for finding female ancestors, which can be very different than finding some of our male ancestors. So that's that's kind of what that is. And it would be a chance. I would also have a Facebook Live or a Facebook group so that we can talk to each other, so that you can ask me questions, but that you can also talk to each other and help each other out as well. So offering some education, some strategy, instruction, offering a community setting, and offering also some accountability, so that you also get weekly prompts from me to make sure you're moving forward. It's one thing to know. People ask me a lot of questions and I try to give them answers, but I never know really how it turns out. So it's a way to help hold you accountable, or give you that extra push you need to think, I'll get to it someday, and to decide that now is someday. So I had put that in the email today. So if you're not on my email list, that's fine. Love for you to join. But you can just leave a comment here and I'll pick it up if you're interested in that, and I can send you the information that way. So thanks for asking, Dave. I appreciate that. Alva said she has a great uncle who was born in 1926, Pittsylvania County, Virginia, and he died before 1930. County Farm, which was a poorhouse, and buried on their property. Can't find the records for that place or his death certificate. Okay, well, Alva, just so you know, I actually do research in Pittsylvania County sometimes, because I have a lot of ancestors who lived there as well. So he died before night. So he would have been 4 years old. He died in the poorhouse and buried on the property. You can't find the records for that place. Sometimes those records didn't necessarily survive. I don't know if you've contacted the Library of Virginia, but I would recommend, if you have not, I would actually call the Library of Virginia and tell them what you're interested in as far as that particular place, and see what they say about the records. I don't know if there would be privacy issues even getting into those records to see what was there. From a death certificate, that is a time period that I believe, should have death certificates for Virginia, but for some reason there is not one for this child. I would also look at what was going on in 1930, of what was going on. As sad as this is, if he died in the poorhouse, they may not have been the best at record keeping. And depending on if there could have been, if you think there might have been, say, an epidemic going through there, if there was like the flu season, the measles season, things like that, it's possible that it was just so many people were passing away at that one time that they just may have just been kind of barely getting by. As sad as that was, even though death certificates were supposed to have been done, they were not always done. One thing, when you're looking for that death certificate, try looking for it without the name, either with one name, the first name or the last name, or no name at all, and just use, say, a birth date, use, if you know a parent's name, something like that, to try and see if you can capture it in case they put a wrong name. I have seen that happen. In case they put, and the transcription was just so poor that it's not picking up when you do a search. Try doing some of those kind of wider open searches. You may end up going through a lot, but even if you know 1930, you could technically even read through all the 1930 death certificates for that time period, if they're available, to see. But I would request the searches to be very wide. Before you go after that, I would definitely talk to people at Library of Virginia to see if you can find out a little bit more about that facility, to find out what was going on there. And the other thing you could talk to, since it was buried on the property, would be to talk to the county and see who's in charge of that particular, what county office would be still in charge of that cemetery, and see where those records are, and perhaps see if you can get into the records that way. I've had some good luck getting into cemetery records through counties. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But if we don't ask, we'll never know. So that would be my thing to do. Oh, hey, Don, I'm so glad it's your first time you could join us. I'm so glad that you are here. Lily said, oh, good gracious, your second and your third great-grandparents grandfathers have the same name. Oh, Lord, honey. That's a tough one. That's when timelines help a lot, because then you can kind of hopefully differentiate some length of times for when they were there. That's a sticky problem. That is for sure. Hey, Debbie from Bear Lake. And Dave said, are the people just in the USA or Europe as well? Oh, the masterclass. To be honest, guys, it's probably really just for the US. You're welcome. If people are from Europe, they are absolutely welcome, because the strategies can be very similar. But because I'm a US-based researcher, and those are the records that I know, and that is the social history that I know when it comes to research, it'll be focused on US ancestors. I would love to be able to open it up to others. I just don't know. I think the strategies would still work, but when it comes to examples and things like that, I would not be able to provide as good a support as I would like to for folks who are taking that class that might be overseas. Dave, that actually brings me into my next question that somebody had asked me. Let me grab that real quick. I'd recently had a question that someone was researching. I believe it was in German records. They tracked down their German ancestors, and they had done everything on the U.S. side, and they needed to proceed to the German side for records. And they were concerned because of the language barrier. And I wanted to bring this up, and I touched on it briefly in last week's live stream, but I wanted to bring it up again for those who might have missed it. When you are working on trying to research in a new country, or this could even be the Catholic records, because oftentimes they might be in Latin, or if you're in the German, German ancestors, the forms might be in German. When you get to that point, stop for a moment and Google genealogy word list for Germany or Latin genealogy word list. There are word lists that have been created out there online. Many of them are at Family Search, the FamilySearch.org's wiki. And what that does is it gives you common translation or translations for common words that you might find. So if you're in the church records, it'll give you common words that you might find so that you can kind of match them up. And because when you think about, if you've done any research, say in Catholic records or a church record, you see a lot of columns. And so there might be name, and the top of the column, the heading might be birth date, it might be parents, it might be godparents, that kind of thing. And they'll show you those common words. So you can actually get some good information without actually speaking the language. You can use those word lists. Now, those will only take you so far when it goes into your research. If you're really getting out of the records and you're getting into things like wills and deeds that are written, say, in German or a different language that you're not familiar with, at that point, you need to get some help translating. And it could be you find somebody who can just do it for you, or you might need to hire somebody who can do it and understand the analysis, because you don't want to miss clues simply because you didn't understand the terminology for that particular country and then in that particular language. So wanted to put that out there because you can find those word lists out there. Absolutely. Dave said, oh, you mean female ancestors who came from Europe? Yeah, Dave, that would work, because they would be somewhat for the masterclass. Yeah, because it'll be, what I'll be covering is finding your female ancestors here in the U.S. records. So once they're here, then we can absolutely look for them, and I have strategies for that as well. So feel free, if Dave, if you have a specific question, you can email me too, and I can answer that as well. But yeah, that should be just fine. So I got you there. All right. Okay, make sure I'm not missing any more questions coming in there. Okay, so again, if you're having any come through, feel free about doing that. Barb said, oh, that was you about the German ancestry. Yes, that's right. It was you. But you know what, Barb? I had somebody else this week. I had two other people, one about German, and I think another one about asking me about Latin. So, and that's why it kind of came up several times. So I wanted to bring it back up for you guys. But yes, thank you. I hope that helped for you there. So I wanted to share, this is a little different topic because I had something kind of unusual show up, and I wanted to give you a heads up. So I had someone I was working with, but we were seeing one of the genealogy databases, and I honestly can't remember which one it was. It may have been MyHeritage. It may have been Find My Past or something. And what we were seeing was in their family tree that they had there, they were coming up as, some of their ancestors were coming up as half siblings when they were actually full siblings. So when comparing trees, like your own tree with somebody else's, but they were coming up awkwardly. So the relationships were not looking as full-blooded. They were half sibling. What was happening is we had in one tree the mother's name, and it was the nickname. So, and then the other tree that we were comparing to, that we were trying to figure out why they thought these children were half siblings instead of full sibling, they had the mother's name as the birth name. And what was happening was the software was picking those up as two different women. It was not recognizing that they were the same women. And so it was making the children as half siblings instead of full siblings. Now, this goes back to nicknames and how you're putting things out there. My recommendation, if you can, and if you know it, is to use the birth name when you're filling out those family trees. But when you are researching, make sure you understand those nicknames sometimes can look very, very different than the birth name. In this case, we had Delia as a nickname for Bridget. That is a very accepted nickname. But the problem is, genealogy software is probably not going to pick that up. It would pick up, it might pick up Birdie, but it wouldn't pick up Delia because it's so different. Sarah and Sally, While they look really different, it's very common here in the US to have that, but there can be some very different accepted versions. So I actually researched nicknames as well. Just wanted to give you a heads up if you're seeing some kind of odd relationships that will pop up. It was just such an unusual thing. I wanted to make sure you guys are paying attention to how you document your ancestors, and make sure you use those the birth names if possible, kind of thing. Barbara said, "Can I suggest any Canadian genealogists?" Barbara, let me look that up and follow up with you about that. Who some Canadian genealogists might be? I think I know a couple who might be able to help you, but let me double check their contact information. So feel free to pop in. Debbie said, "Can you add nickname Sally when searching?" Sure. Yeah, actually, when you're searching, I might do the birth name. So maybe I would use Sarah and do that. But then I would also, and go through the results I get, and then I would go back and research on the name Sally and see what I would get. And I might go through several variations on that kind of thing. Some of the very common ones. So, for instance, like, believe it or not, sometimes they will pick up Margaret and Peggy because those are the same, and the software will pick that up, but it's not picking up all of them. Like I said, Delia and Bridget, because that is so different. I didn't pick it up. I had to actually research those nicknames to find it. But yeah, so I'll go in and do it that way. It was just an interesting thought that I'd never really thought about when it came to how I structured that tree. Okay, I had another question this week. I thought this was real interesting. We talked a lot about photographs recently, and someone had asked me how to scan oversized photographs. And if anybody has a good way, I'd love for you to pop it into the comments for me, because here's the deal. In the past, if I was going to scan a large photograph, there's really large ones that, just the really big ones that, you have like over a fireplace kind of thing. I would actually use a FlipPal scanner because it came with the stitching technology. So you would scan portions of it, and then I would run it through the program, and it would stitch it all together. Well, I found out this week actually that FlipPal is going away and is no longer going to be available. So if you have an old FlipPal, you can still do it that way, but you can't purchase them anymore. But there are a lot of online. There's a lot of software when it comes to photos editing that have the stitching capabilities. I've not used any other ones. So if you guys know of any that you use and that you like, I would love for you to pop it in the comments either now or later, because I'd love to be able to share that. I'm always looking to make sure people have what they need when it comes to those scanning options with that. So because my normal way is going away. So wanted to see what you guys think about that. A woman wrote me this week. Actually, I think this may have been a comment. This is on newspaper research, and I thought this was so fabulous. She told this wonderful story that she had been researching, and she had discovered her ancestor was born out of wedlock. And she actually found the father's name in the legal notices of the newspaper of the time. Guys, when you are checking out your doing newspaper research, do not overlook those legal notices. They're going to be in the back typically, and you may or may not find a name that you're looking for. But in this case, because she didn't know the person's names, she went through it to be able to find the father's name listed. And in this case, I don't remember the year it was, but it was a legal notice naming him as the father. It had to do with, it wasn't bastardy bonds, but it was for payment and support for the child. So that's where she found the father's name. So it was an interesting way to find her ancestor. It was a fabulous success record and a good reminder that when you're looking for legal things like that, if your ancestor could have been caught up, check those legal notices. Same thing can happen if you're missing, say the estate records didn't survive for the county that you're researching. Maybe the courthouse had burned. You can actually check the legal notices for the local newspapers to see if they're, because they would have had to had made certain announcements and they would have advertised for the estate sale and all of that. You can find those in those legal notices. So it can help you sift out some of those pieces of the puzzle when the county records may have burned. It's a nice little resource to check back on. So thought you might want to try that out in your research as you go about the week. So, okay, guys, excuse me, I'm going to get a sip of water here real quick. I always get so thirsty when I'm doing these. Alva said, are any good tricks to figure out who might be in those old photographs? You're left with no name on the back. Oh, Alva, you are talking my language now. And I've actually written a whole book about it. So there's a book actually on the website. I will tell you, there are a lot of good posts over there as well. So briefly, when it comes to understanding and determining who might be in those photographs, the first thing you want to do is identify what's the history of that photograph. How did you come to have it? So did it come to you through somebody on your mother's side of the family or on your father's side of the family? Is there any history to that photograph that you know that it always sat in Aunt Betty's house? So that could help you narrow down what side of the family it's on and who could potentially be in that side of the family. You want to be able to date the photograph. So you want to be able to date it and know who, about what year it was taken. That, again, can help you eliminate who might be in that photograph and who would not be in that photograph. So there are lots of ways to do that. Again, I have a lot of articles over on the website of that. If you just, in the search bar, put photographs, you'll find it. But things, what type of photograph it is. Is it a cabinet card? Is it a carte de visite? Is it more, more modern photograph? That type of thing. That would help. Look at the fashions the people are wearing. That can tell you how old, approximate dates for that type of thing. Look at the hair. Don't just look at the clothes. Look at the hair. You can look at all of that to see who might be in that photograph. And then once you kind of figure that part out, you go into your family tree and go, okay, I think it's a gentleman, and he's probably, this was, you're estimating it was taken in the 1910s. You know that it is on Aunt Betty's side of the family, and you see that there's a photographer's mark that says it was taken in Danville, Virginia. So you can place, so who in your tree could have been approximately that age and that time period living in Danville during that time period. That's that is the process in a very, very small nutshell. Again, but those are some of the basic steps to do that. The other thing, Alva, is really just to get as many eyes on that photograph as possible. Get it into, I know that the Pittsylvania County, Virginia has a Facebook page. You can upload it there and see if anybody recognizes them. I've done that actually. I think I put them on that particular page. So you can do that to get some eyes on it. You can do, you can put them on your family Facebook page. You can put them on deadfred.com. Those types of organizations as well, and see how many eyes you can get on there to help you make that identification. So it's a fun thing to do. It really is. I really enjoy identifying photographs. As you guys know, it can take a while, and I haven't gotten all of mine done, but I am slowly making my way through those photographs. So hopefully one day, the goal is to have every one of them identified. So yeah, so guys, that's about what I have for you today. If you have anything, I'm just checking my notes to see what is going on. Oh, so go ahead and pop questions if you have one in there. So this is the last thing I was going to cover, as I got a lot of questions this week about name changes and having an ancestor who would have made a name change. Oh, Debbie, yes, I'll do that. I'll link the YouTube to the Facebook. Okay, I can do that. Oh, there are two. I'll take care of that. Thanks, Debbie, for letting me know. Okay, name changes. So one of the things is, it was very easy at one time for our ancestors to change their name for whatever reason. It was very easy for them to leave a family, change a name, and create a life somewhere else. And I think the one thing to understand is they're not always solvable. And if you can't solve that, that doesn't mean you're not a good researcher. Just sometimes they are not solvable. So, but one of the ways to, if possible, to get clues is to really pay attention to oral history and really seek out the family history there. Because a lot of times these folks who just disappeared out of a family, there's stories in that family. And you may have to go to other sides of your family. You may need to get to those collateral lines to find out the stories. Okay. And so from that, you just pick clues. You may or may not pick up a clue, but hopefully you can pick up a clue. And you're looking for things like, what was his occupation? Where are the clues saying that he might have gone, that he might have done? Because that gives you a place to start looking. So if you have a general time period, you know an occupation, you know where he came from, those are things to start trying to pick up a trail. It is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. I think DNA is helping with some of those cases now because people are starting to make matches and they're trying to figure out, wait a minute, how did he end up here? Because we thought he was here. Those kinds of things, those are very, very tough to decipher. But do as much research into that oral history, do as much research into them in the time period before they disappeared so that you can kind of recognize who they are, so that you might recognize some of their patterns in a new location. Again, it's not easy and can be very difficult. Sometimes those name changes, people just change the name because they didn't like their name. And so those guys are a little easier to find because they're still in the same location. It's just they're going by a different name. And by understanding and really paying attention to who they were and what they did, if you can see samples of handwriting and compare handwritings, that can help you determine if they were one and the same. Those are good ways to get started figuring that out. They're a lot easier because they didn't disappear. They just changed their name, and you can track them where one ends and one begins. You can, and they are doing the same job, and they're around the same people, and they're appearing in the same records. You can start to pick up that they are the same person in that case there. So let's see. Barb says, do all churches of the Latter-day Saints have records? Some churches, now Barb, I have to qualify this because I am not LDS, so I am not 100% sure. They would have access. So they don't necessarily have the records there, but a lot of them have their family history centers or libraries within there that are staffed by volunteers. And so you can absolutely go in, and they have the computers, and they'll help you access family search. They can help you research. They can help you, I guess, order. They no longer send out the microfilms. So that's where people used to go to get the microfilms. We don't do that anymore, but they have access to the catalog. And sometimes what they will have is there are some records that Family Search has that are digitized, but they're only viewable at a family history library center or site. So you would need to go to their site at the church to be able to view those records. I don't know why that is. I just know that is the way some of that is. So absolutely, if you happen to live near an LDS church, then absolutely check out when their hours are. They are volunteer staff, so you do need to check what their hours are going to be. Debbie, talking about the person with the same name. Yeah, if they've changed the name, but they haven't gone anywhere, if they're in the same place in that census and family list, then you can be pretty assured that they are the same person. With that, I had an incident with that in my family, that every researcher out there, every family tree out there had two gentlemen listed separately as sons of my ancestor, but they were one and the same. And if you didn't know, there was no formal record. If you did not know that Johnny and Boss Henry were the same person, you would never, because of oral history, there was nothing to indicate they were the same person. So yeah, absolutely. You need to get into that oral history and then look where they are. But again, there were a lot of clues there. People had just missed it in the trees. So yeah. Okay, guys. So that's really all I have for you. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me and asking these questions. Oh, you're welcome, Barb. Asking questions for this. Feel free to keep asking if you need to. I'll follow up on these later as well. And we will be back next Thursday to talk more genealogy. And I look forward to seeing keep seeing your comments and your questions. If you have a burning question that you think you would love to hear me do a talk about on a YouTube live, feel free to email me or pop it into the comments. I'll be happy to do that. I'm always looking for, I want to make sure that what I'm talking about is something you're interested in. So I hope that we do that here. If you think this was interesting, if you think it's helpful, I'd love for you to share it with your genealogy friends. They're welcome to view it. It will be ready shortly for replay. And by this, in just a little bit, once I get off and get everything going, it'll be ready for replay and we can share it out. All right, guys, have a great day, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.